Well, I
Hello and welcome to another
appreciate the.
edition. Yeah, sorry about that. Hello and welcome to another edition of Ephlux Insights. My name is Barbara Khan. I'm the entrepreneur in residence for this program. We're very happy to be joined today by Scott Allison, the chairman and CEO of Allison and Partners, and he'll be talking to us today about how he's built such an incredible and successful organization. And we're going to actually talk about something that we just found out right now. Scott's at the Seattle airport. He's managed to take out some time to speak to us. Very nice of him. And he's been at Seattle to acquire a business and grow his enterprise and his empire. So that's going to be our first question. Scott, thanks for joining us. And could you just tell us a little bit about what you've been up to at Seattle?
No, Babar, it's great to be on the show. I appreciate the time. I'm sorry, I'm talking from the airport. It's a little bit loud here, but I am up at Seattle Airport. I'm just headed home. We acquired just last week the employees and clients of a firm called Frous Communications, which is a very well-known, noteworthy firm in Seattle and Portland. It's been great for us because we see the Pacific Northwest as a key region. We've had a small office here for a few years, but this has been a chance to really accelerate our growth in the region. So 18 people came on board last week. I flew up yesterday to meet the team up here for the first time and couldn't be more thrilled. They're smart, bright, passionate folks. Bob has built a really strong team up here. Bob is really noted in the Seattle area. So we couldn't be more pleased to have 18 dedicated, sharp, passionate people join our company. We think it's a great cultural fit. We spend a lot of time when we're looking at the potential, acquisition of employees and talents at a company of really studying their culture and making sure that it would be a strong culture fit for us. So from our standpoint, this was a real winner.
All right, that's great. And now we can move on to my intended topic for our discussion. You built an organization right after the dot-com bubble. People would have been normally reluctant to start a business right after that, and then on top of the fact that you primarily are famous, I would say, in PR, as per the people I've spoken to. How did you build a business at that really turbulent time? And could you talk a bit about the sort of team building effort that you put into encouraging people to do the work for you, getting your clients on your side, and building a culture that is pretty much a winning culture?
Well, no, it's you used the word reluctant to start a business in 2001. Foolish might be even a better word. It was an incredibly difficult time, and frankly, I did not do this by myself. I was incredibly blessed to have three other founding partners. Andy Hardy Brown and I started the original company, and were quickly joined by Jonathan Haidt and Scott Pansky. And I never could have built a company this size by myself. And it was critical to me when we even named the company, and people really encouraged me to have my name on the door. The only way I would go along with it is if we also added "and partners," because I knew it was going to be critical to grow and expand. We had to have a team of people. So the four of us have worked, diligently the last 13 years to build this company up. And when we launched the company, Andy and I were sitting in Belden Place, a small restaurant alley in San Francisco, and we started talking about the philosophy of the agency. And one of the things we talked about is that the morale at most agencies can be very poor. And what happens is they are very hierarchical, somewhat ego-driven, and people are in general very unhappy. So we said we've got to try to break that. We want to have a really non-hierarchical organization, a very flat organization, what really is kind of void of politics, void of silos. And we made a couple of decisions back then that have really carried us through. One of which is we said we're only going to have one P&L. And in our business, that can be really important because, what happens is if you have a Chicago office and they have their own P&L, and if you have an office in Los Angeles and they have their own P&L, collaboration is really not there. They're not incentivized to collaborate. And we knew that this would impact our clients and employees in a negative way. So even that simple decision of we will always have one P&L, we think has really carried us through. So as we've built the company diligently over the years, we now have 17 offices, 3 continents. We opened up in China last year. I was a couple weeks ago was in Beijing and Shanghai. Our team members there. We have offices in London and Paris. and throughout the U.S., I think the common theme, doesn't matter what the language is or where people are sitting, is having people that are smart, passionate, and really want to be entrepreneurs. They want to really feel that they're making a contribution. So that's really played out over this 13-year period.
All right, that's brilliant. It's nice to get people on board who are like-minded and see the bigger picture of the organization. And this aspect about P&L being unified is quite unique, I would say. And it's an interesting perspective that everyone could feel like they have to collaborate across geographies, even if it's within the same country, if you will. And I do often see with our own Ephlux clients, and I do see with our own partner organizations that while they have the justifications to have different regions and think of it as competing with each other, together collaboratively you can achieve much more. So my second question to you, since you brought up China, is that you recently expanded into Singapore. Could you tell us about how that came about, that you would want to expand into Singapore, and how the experience has been thus far in that part of the world?
Absolutely. Well, we see the growth in Asia as critical, and I give, you asked me to mention some of the rock stars in the company, and Andy Hardy-Brown, who I founded the company with, is truly a rock star, because Andy's always been a visionary and really pushed the company into different areas. And a couple years ago, Andy said, we really need to be in Asia. That's going to, and so he went out there on some exploratory visits. As you can imagine, we're a relatively small company on the scale of some of the big holding company PR firms. We have a little over 200 people. So this was pretty ambitious. And I frankly thought, maybe it's too ambitious. Do we really have the resources to compete? So Andy made multiple trips out to China, and we were looking for the right partner. And we found a terrific company, a PR Century, and we made an offer to acquire the company and their employees and clients. And it's been a fantastic fit for us. So that gave us offices in Beijing and Shanghai. We're having an opportunity to work both with some local Chinese companies and U.S. companies that are doing work in China. So that was a great start for us. But we knew that really we had to continue to build out. And you saw that Singapore was a natural evolution there. And so that was our next step, open up in Singapore. We'll continue to look for other opportunities in Asia. We're studying closely Hong Kong right now as another addition to us. But, for us, Babar, it's always driven by people. So we don't really say, hey, we're going here or there. It always starts with, can we find great people? And Serena Tan was an incredible person in Singapore. And when we found Serena and Andy was having conversations with her, we really felt this is an incredible person, an entrepreneur, somebody who knows the market, somebody that we would really like to team up with. And Serena just joined the company a couple weeks ago. We announced our Singapore office, the other day. So fast moving, but always driven by the people.
Absolutely. And to be clear on my own research into this sort of expansion that you've done across China, Singapore, and so basically I'll talk about China and Singapore. There is not much emphasis. Well, I'll talk about China then. There's not much emphasis on public relations as a proactive measure. It's mostly about reactive. And even so, with the agencies that are present in there, so like in China, the agencies that associate themselves with the marketing agencies in China are Ogilvy, Weeden Kennedy, Ogilvy One, Mindshare, Group M, and then on the public relations standpoint, you've got Weber Shandwick, Edelman, Burson, and Rutherford. But even in that context, they don't have. It's not really proactive PR. It's more about collaborating with their existing organization and being a subsidiary arm of that organization. So I don't see you having too many hurdles in terms of market entry. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. And if you said you've got a good partner on board, so it'll probably work out. And on Singapore's side, it's again, well, they're everywhere: Ogilvy, Mindshare, Google, Wonderman, and Mediacom. So if you're getting partners in there, that's brilliant, and it's a pretty impressive approach where you're not looking at. It's quite the Elon Musk approach, I would say, where if you ask Elon Musk, why did you start this business? He doesn't say, I saw the market opportunity and I thought to invest and I'd get X out of it. In terms of money, he usually talks about, I found that something didn't exist and something should have existed, so I created it. So your approach about having to find the people first and then look into, okay, is this a viable market or not? That's quite impressive. So could you tell us about your experiences that led to this thought process where you think that people first and then profits later? Could you talk about that, because it's quite unique to find this across any industry, no much less marketing and advertising.
Well, we've been very methodical in the growth plan, and we do believe it's got to be people before profits, and it also believes it takes time. And we've had a great partner with MDC who has taken the same view, build for the long haul. And I think it's kind of a cliche, but I think it's totally true, this concept of built to last and build something for the long term. And I think when you get involved in Asia, it takes time. There's a learning curve. And to go in there and think that you're immediately going to generate significant profits, that's not always the case. You have to be very patient. We also know that in these local markets, it would be very difficult to send someone from the U.S. and drop them into Shanghai or Beijing and hope that they could be successful. I'm not saying that that hasn't been done, and if you spend time in Asia, you run into a lot of expats that have spent time there. But we knew that having a local team of Chinese citizens who had a long history in the marketplace and were considered to be really trusted advisors, that was critical to us too. Same thing in Singapore. Serena Tan has an impeccable background, and to have somebody like that who really knows how to navigate the local communities. And to be honest, there's some similarities even in the U.S. If you're going to open up in Washington, D.C., you better have people that understand the market, or Chicago, or San Diego. You need local people. So our approach has always been to build locally, build people that have extensive market experience, rather than just try to move someone from another market.
Absolutely. Even our own organization, where their headquarters, Ephlux Global's headquarters are in LA, and they've yet to expand onto the East Coast. And even for them, it's not about sending someone from LA to New York. They're actually looking into, well, it's an active approach right now. They're looking into finding a chief executive that they could hire into New York, but someone with experience in that region. So that's definitely there. Even I'm reminded of Peter Drucker's quote about culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it quite often happens. I've seen it in Hong Kong firsthand, where people who has absolutely no experience in, much less Asia, the continent, has been sent to take over Hong Kong, a market he has very little understanding about. And as you have seen firsthand, Hong Kong, while it's considered to be a part of China, but not really, Hong Kong and Shanghai, in terms of the customer base, in terms of profiles, poles apart in terms of everything. And you've got such deep penetration of expatriates in that region. So, best of luck for that growth plan. A bit more on Singapore, if you don't mind. Could you tell us about what kind of services you'd be starting off to offer in Singapore? Because you've got a vast range of services. I'd just like to know, based on the sort of people that you brought in there, what kind of services would you start off with, and what kind of client bases would you be targeting?
Well, we've started now. We just acquired a very significant real estate developer that owns one of the most significant shopping mall developments in Singapore, and that is a great first step for us. So we offer a tremendous amount of support in the area of corporate, certainly media relations, digital, social media, public affairs, issues management. And that's, will really be a heavy focus for us. It will mirror a lot of the services that we offer in the U.S. Again, though, with really highly local institutional knowledge.
All right. So we're just going to go into a few topic points, just sort of like a PR piece, or like a brainstorming exercise, if you will. So it was recently reported that the New York Times and other publications as well they'll be moving forward with plans that they A/B tested it quite a bit, and they will be moving forward with plans to make it less obvious to readers that you can distinguish between paid content and organic news stories. This could possibly backfire, but if it's openly being stated and across various marketing publications, it's not like they're hiding anything. What do you think about a move along these lines, if you don't mind answering it? And how does that work in favor of New York Times and for their customers?
Well, this business has changed at such a rapid rate, and I mean both the communications and certainly the media business. And we've seen this coming and evolving, and I think there's pros and cons to it. I think it's all about content right now, and everybody is so focused on generating content that really inspires readers and draws traffic. And I think a lot of the, what I would call the old world media companies, the New York Times and some of the holding companies that own them, recognize that great content can come from a lot of different places, even from a paid venue. So it's all about attracting readers by whatever they're going to be interested in and follow. I think there is some risk. You lose some objectivity when you do this. I think people were really in the PR process before was third-party endorsements. So the New York Times was a trusted resource. If they were, putting out an article talking about a new company, service, restaurant, play, do you lose some of that if you're emphasizing a bit more paid content? Yeah, you do. That's absolutely a risk for it. But we're in such a content culture now, and there are so many people that are able to generate good content through a variety of channels. I think this is only the beginning, and this is something that's not going to go away. I think the consumer of content is going to have to be very discerning and really understanding what they're reading and where did it originate from.
Yeah.
I think when you get in the area of particularly financial communications and you're seeing recommendations on where to make investments, that can be a very tricky area, if that becomes a paid, promoted piece. So I think the burden now falls upon the consumer to be very judicious in understanding the content that they're reading and where did it come from.
Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting perspective. That we are having a content-heavy world right now, and it is often really hard to tell unless you see, for example, on Forbes, if there's an article by SAP, they do mention that this article is by SAP, and then you can figure out from the article who is the thought leader or the executive that they're trying to highlight from it. BuzzFeed does this as well when it's engaging with its youth audiences. Mountain Dew will be written as if it's a contributor, but that's not quite obvious. With the New York Times, I would expect that it would possibly backfire. And then there's also things like when I read an article, I'll spend maybe 40% of my time on the article itself. I'll sort of skim through it, but I'll spend majority of my time in the comments section. I know quite a few people who do this. And what is often the case is that, for example, on CNN, for example, there's CNN's tech section. People always insinuate that possibly this is paid content because they hardly ever bash Apple. On the other hand, when you go on CNN's Fortune magazine, they always bash Microsoft and Apple at the same time. So people wonder are one of the competitors paying them for it? So it's one of those things where there are people speculating about what the source of this content is. And then they're also thinking about the authenticity of it from a journalistic perspective, because I often find that people respect New York Times to be one of the few journalistic publications that has investigative reporting still intact. So I would consider it to be something that would backfire at least down the road, because I believe that's their USP among other key differentiators. So okay, so your perspective on that is quite interesting. If you'd like to add on anything to this point.
No, I think it's a great question, and I think you're dead on with the approach and your thoughts on it as well. I think it really puts the burden on the reader to try to disseminate where does this this content coming from, and I think you're going to have to be probably a little more cynical to really think through. Okay, and is there a bit of an agenda here that I need to better understand?
Absolutely. That's generally what people are usually concerned about when they read content. They'll read, like, for example, again, the comments section of articles, of any sort of article, if they have a comments section, are usually the gems, and then people have a discussion, and the moderator tries to jump in and call the conversation in his favor. So it's usually about, this looks too much of a paid piece. Why didn't you just write Apple's name at the top if you're going to talk about wearable tech? Things like that. It comes up way too often. It's usually hilarious. So when the audience is from the United States, they usually, usually try to pick up on major brands, and then it becomes a political discussion, and then you're like, where was the original topic? And then they're talking about Obama, and you're like, okay, what was the actual objective of this conversation? But I do feel that this could backfire. But okay, so moving on to a different topic now. They say, yeah, brands should learn from their mistakes, and we should always learn from history. And we've just experienced the FIFA World Cup 2014. And keeping in mind that there's a lot of transparency, and then again, like we just mentioned, based on content discussions, consumers like yourself and I, we can always, if we're smart enough, and you and I being in the marketing space, if we're smart enough, we can actually detect what is paid and what is genuine content. So what in this particular era where other people are becoming more empowered and figuring out what is the truth and what is just promotion, what can brands do at the Commonwealth Games? Well, that's already passed on, but what can brands do today to sort of prepare themselves for the FIFA 2018 to take place in Russia? And what can they do in the future to sort of pull in an audience that they feel is only content-centric for when they have these international games and international events that have a variety of nationalities coming in, a variety of languages and cultures coming in? And how do you think they can tap into that, keeping in mind the lessons that we picked up from FIFA and other similar events all over the world?
Well, I think the 2014 World Cup was a huge success on many fronts. I think as football, or soccer as it's called in the U.S., gets more and more popular, it truly has become the global event. I think you could make an argument that World Cup has even surpassed the Olympics in some way as far as interest. It's a fantastic platform.
Yeah.
I think what everybody, if you're getting in the area of corporate sponsorships and participating in events like this, it's all about authenticity. And I think if you look at, I look at a 17-year-old son and a 21-year-old daughter, they can really discern already what's a promotional hype versus something that's authentic. And I think that brands that do this really well offer up authenticity. They offer up something that's really unique. It's insightful. It's great content. Maybe it's one of the players involved versus a very corporate, almost commercial kind of message. And I think the companies that have figured that out are making true headway. And so I think the opportunity in 2018 is, how do you make it even better? How do you make it really engaging with the fans of World Cup and the brands?
Yeah. I was actually just talking about this with one of our partners.